Everyone gather around. My stepmother's voice carried across the marble foyer of the Sullivan Mansion. Time for the annual family photo. I watched from my corner as they assembled. My father in his perfectly tailored suit, my stepmother Victoria directing everyone into position, my stepbrothers Marcus and Andrew preening in their matching blazers. The photographer adjusted his lights, preparing to capture another perfect moment in the Sullivan family's carefully curated history. Sophia. Victoria's eyes landed on me with familiar disdain. Be a dear and adjust the curtains. The light's all wrong. At 28, I was still being treated like the help instead of family. But I didn't argue. I simply nodded and moved to the windows, knowing I wouldn't be invited into the frame. I hadn't been part of a family photo since I was 8 years old. Since Victoria had married my father and decided the daughter from his first marriage didn't fit her vision of the perfect family. Perfect, the photographer exclaimed. The Sullivans really are America's perfect business dynasty. If only they knew. Behind my quiet exterior, I smiled slightly. They had no idea that the security cameras recording this moment, like every moment in the Sullivan Mansion, belonged to my company. No idea that their perfect facade was being archived on my servers, every secret and lie cataloged and time-stamped. 20 years of exclusion had taught me something valuable. The best place to observe is from the shadows. It started the day Victoria moved in. I was 8, still grieving my mother's death, when this former beauty queen swept into our lives with her 2 sons and her plans for the perfect blended family. Plans that, it quickly became clear, didn't include me. First came the accidental exclusions from family events. Then the separate dining arrangements. I wasn't ready for formal family dinners. By the time I was 12, I was essentially living in the guest wing, attended by staff, but otherwise forgotten. My father, consumed by running Sullivan Enterprises, didn't notice or didn't care. He was too busy grooming Marcus and Andrew to take over the company, too enchanted by Victoria's social connections to see what was happening to his own daughter. But being invisible had advantages. No one noticed when I started spending time with George, the head of mansion security. He taught me about camera systems, access controls, the invisible web of technology that protected the wealthy. No one cared when I chose to study cybersecurity in college instead of business like my stepbrothers. At least she's learning a trade. Victoria had sniffed when I announced my major. Someone has to manage the help. I graduated summa cum laude. No one from my family attended the ceremony. That same year, I founded Sentinel Security Solutions, though not under my own name. The company documents listed Sarah Chen as the founder and CEO. My college roommate had been happy to play the role of public face, understanding what I was building. Because while Victoria was busy planning galas, and Marcus and Andrew were playing at being executives, I was creating something powerful. Starting with small contracts, building a reputation for excellence and discretion, Sentinel Security grew rapidly. The wealthy love their privacy, and they'll pay handsomely to protect it. Within 5 years, Sentinel was providing security for half of New York's elite, including, through a series of shell companies and subsidiaries, the Sullivan family. Victoria herself had insisted on upgrading the mansion's security after a series of high-profile home invasions in their social circle. She never looked closely at the company's ownership, never questioned why their bid was slightly lower than competitors. And so I watched. Every meeting, every private conversation, every backroom deal, all captured and stored on my secure servers. I saw Marcus embezzling from the company accounts, Andrew's drug habits and gambling debts, Victoria's secret meetings with business rivals. Most importantly, I saw my father's transformation from respected businessman to willing participant in corporate fraud. The perfect family's perfect facade was built on lies, corruption, and stolen money, and I had proof of all of it. Safia. Victoria's sharp voice pulled me from my thoughts. Stop dawdling with those curtains. We have guests coming for the foundation dinner. The foundation, Victoria's pride and joy, the Sullivan Family Charitable Foundation. On paper, it supported children's education. In reality, it was a sophisticated money laundering operation. The security cameras had captured plenty of evidence of that too. Yes, Victoria, I said quietly, adjusting the curtains one final time. As the photographer packed up his equipment, my phone buzzed with an alert from Sentinel's monitoring system. Another suspicious transfer from the foundation's accounts. $3 million moved through a series of shell companies before disappearing into an offshore account. I added it to my growing file of evidence. The question wasn't if I would expose them, but when. That evening's foundation dinner was exactly what you'd expect. Wealthy donors writing checks, Victoria making tearful speeches about helping underprivileged children, Marcus and Andrew working the room like the corporate princes they pretended to be. I stood in my usual corner, watching the security feeds on my tablet. Every camera angle perfect, every conversation recorded in crystal clear audio. Quite an operation you're running. I turned to find James Carter beside me, the FBI's lead investigator for financial crimes, though no one at the party knew that. He was here undercover, investigating rumors of corporate fraud at Sullivan Enterprises. I don't run anything, I said carefully. I just manage the security systems. He smiled slightly. Ms. Chen, you mean? Or should I say Ms. Sullivan? My heart stopped. I don't know what you're talking about. Relax. He sipped his champagne. Your secret's safe. We've been watching Sentinel Security for months. Very impressive work. Almost as impressive as the evidence you've been collecting. I studied him carefully. What do you want? Partnership. We're building a case, but your surveillance records would make it airtight. Together, we cooled. Safia. Victoria's voice cut through the crowd. Stop chatting and check the cameras in the East Wing. I thought I saw a light flickering. I gave James a bland smile. Duty calls. Excuse me. As I walked away, my mind was racing. The FBI was watching. The perfect family's perfect crime was about to unravel, and I had a decision to make. That night, after the guests had gone and the mansion was quiet, I sat in my private office, hidden away in the guest wing where no one ever visited. On my screens, the security feeds showed different scenes. Marcus in his study, shredding documents. Andrew making frantic phone calls to his bookie. Victoria in the garden, having a heated argument with someone on her phone. And my father. My father sat alone in his office, staring at an old photograph. I zoomed in the camera. It was a picture of him and my mother, holding a baby. Me. Before Victoria, before the perfect facade, before everything went wrong. For a moment, I felt a flicker of doubt. Could I really destroy them all? Then I remembered 20 years of exclusion, 20 years of being treated like a ghost in my own home, 20 years of watching them steal and lie and corrupt everything they touched. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to James Carter. The subject line was simple: evidence attached. The perfect family was about to learn that the person they tried to erase had been watching all along. And I had seen everything. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in watching people unravel. I monitored it all through my security feeds. watching each family member react to the first tremors of their world collapsing. It started with a phone call to Marcus from the company's chief financial officer. The SEC is asking questions. The CFO's voice crackled through my perfectly placed microphones. They're auditing all foundation transactions from the past 5 years. Marcus paced his office, running hands through his perfectly styled hair. Stall them. Use the usual procedures. They've frozen the offshore accounts. All of them. I watched the color drain from my stepbrother's face as he realized their usual escape routes were closed. In another feed, I saw Andrew receiving similar news from his private banker. All his secret accounts, the ones he used for gambling debts and drug payments, were suddenly inaccessible. Victoria took longer to notice something was wrong. She was too busy planning the foundation's next gala, ordering staff around with her usual imperial manner, until her personal assistant interrupted with an urgent message. "Mrs. Sullivan, the New York Times is on the line. They're asking for comment about allegations of money laundering through the foundation." I zoomed in on Victoria's face just in time to catch her perfect mask crack. For a split second, real fear showed through. My father was the last to know. I watched through the camera in his office as Marcus burst in, waving his phone. "Dad, we have a problem. Someone's talking to the feds. Someone who knows everything." For the first time in years, I saw my father look old, tired. "What do you mean? Everything?" "The foundation, the offshore accounts, the fake contracts, all of it. They have documentation, video recordings, audio files." My father's eyes narrowed. "Video recordings?" "From our own security systems." Marcus was practically shouting now. "Every meeting, every conversation, it's all been recorded." I smiled, watching my father's face as realization dawned. He looked straight at the camera in his office, the one he'd never paid attention to before. For a moment, I thought I saw recognition in his eyes. Then Victoria swept in, already in damage control mode. I called the lawyers, all of them, and the PR team. "We need to present a united front." She looked around the office. "Where's Sophia?" My father frowned. "What does Sophia have to do with this?" "She manages the security systems." Victoria snapped. "If someone's been accessing our cameras." "You mean the cameras you insisted we upgrade?" My father's voice was quiet. "The contract you pushed through without review." Victoria's perfect composure slipped again. "What are you suggesting?" "Nothing." He turned to stare out the window. "Nothing at all." I switched feeds to the mansion's entrance just in time to see 3 black SUVs pull up. FBI agents emerged, led by James Carter. "Right on schedule," I murmured. My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah Chin, my public face at Sentinel Security. "They're moving on all locations simultaneously. 15 federal warrants being executed right now." I sent back a thumbs up, then switched my attention to the main foyer camera. Victoria was trying to prevent the agents from entering, waving papers from her lawyers. "This is harassment. We're upstanding members of the community." "Mrs. Sullivan." James Carter's voice was polite but firm. "We have warrants for the arrest of Marcus and Andrew Sullivan on charges of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. We also have a warrant to seize all electronic devices and security recordings from the premises." "Security recordings?" Victoria's voice rose an octave. "But those belong to Sentinel Security. You can't." "Actually," Carter smiled slightly, "we have full cooperation from Sentinel's CEO, Ms. Chin. Or should I say?" He looked directly into the nearest camera. Miss Sullivan? The silence that followed was deafening. I watched Victoria's face as she processed what he'd said, as she finally understood who had been watching all along. "No," she whispered. "That's impossible. She's nothing. She's no one. She," my father said quietly, "is my daughter, the one you told me to forget." I switched feeds again, watching as agents led Marcus and Andrew out in handcuffs. My stepbrothers were shouting about lawyers, about family loyalty, about how this must be some mistake. But my attention was on my father. He stood in his office, staring at that old photograph again. Then he did something that surprised me. He walked to the camera and spoke directly into it. "I'm sorry, Sophia. I should have seen what was happening. Should have protected you." He paused, then added softly, "Your mother would be ashamed of what I've become." For the first time since I started this, I felt tears in my eyes. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Sarah. They found the Foundation's real books. Victoria's being arrested too. I watched through the cameras as they led my stepmother out. Her perfect hair was mussed, her designer outfit wrinkled. She was crying, mascara running down her cheeks. "This is your fault," she screamed at my father. "You and your precious first wife's daughter. We gave you everything. The perfect family. The perfect image. Perfect." My father's laugh was bitter. "We destroyed the only perfect thing I had, and now we're paying for it." I switched off the feed, letting my screens go dark. 20 years of watching, waiting, and recording had led to this moment. The perfect family's crimes were exposed. Their empire was crumbling. But as I sat in my hidden office, listening to the chaos below, I realized this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning, because I had one more card to play. One final revelation that would change everything. And this time, I wouldn't be watching from the shadows. This time, I would step into the light. The Sullivan mansion felt different without the perfect family. Empty rooms echoed with memories. Security cameras watching silently as federal agents boxed up evidence of 2 decades of fraud. I sat in my father's office, now my office, reviewing the final piece of evidence I hadn't turned over to the FBI. A video from 15 years ago, captured by the old security system. The one Victoria had insisted on replacing with my company's equipment. On the screen, my father and Victoria stood in this very room, arguing about me. "She's becoming a problem," Victoria said, pacing in agitation. "She's too smart, asks too many questions. She'll figure out what we're doing with the Foundation." My father looked tired, already beaten down. "She's my daughter, Victoria, my only link to Catherine. Your dead wife isn't here anymore." Victoria snapped. "I am. And I'm telling you, either the girl goes to boarding school or our arrangement ends. Choose." I watched my father's face as he made the choice that would shape all our lives. "I'll make the arrangements." 2 weeks later, I was shipped off to a boarding school in Switzerland. The perfect solution. Far enough away that I couldn't interfere with their schemes, but expensive enough to maintain the family's charitable image. What they hadn't counted on was that my exile would give me exactly what I needed: distance, perspective, and time to plan. My phone buzzed. James Carter calling. "The DA is offering deals," he said without preamble. "Marcus and Andrew are ready to flip on Victoria. They're claiming she masterminded everything." I smiled. "And the evidence I sent this morning?" Game changer. Victoria's lawyers are already reaching out for plea negotiations. The evidence in question was devastating. Videos of Victoria meeting with known money launderers, Audio recordings of her threatening employees who asked questions. Paper trails showing her systematic looting of the foundation. "What about my father?" I asked quietly. Carter sighed. "He's cooperating fully. His lawyer thinks with his age and health, he might avoid jail time. But the company will need new leadership," I finished. Because that was my final card, the one I'd been holding back until now. While Victoria had been busy destroying the family's legitimate business, I had been quietly buying shares through various shell companies. Combined with my father's shares, which would be forfeited under the plea agreement, I now controlled 51% of Sullivan Enterprises. The prodigal daughter wasn't just back. She owned everything. A knock at the office door made me look up. My father stood there, looking older than his 65 years. "The FBI said I'd find you here," he said softly. I gestured to the chair across from me. He sat down heavily, his eyes moving to the security camera in the corner. "All these years," he murmured, "you were watching, building your own empire while we destroyed ours." "Not destroying," I corrected, "transforming. Sullivan Enterprises can be legitimate again, ethical." He studied my face, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in 20 years. "You look so much like your mother. She would have been proud." Would she? I turned my laptop so he could see the old video still playing. "Proud that you chose Victoria's schemes over your own daughter." He flinched. I was weak, afraid of losing everything if Victoria exposed my early frauds to the board. But in trying to protect our wealth, I lost something far more valuable. Your soul, my daughter. Silence filled the room. Through the windows, I could see federal agents leading the last of Victoria's conspirators out of the mansion. I reviewed the plea agreement. I said finally, "You'll avoid prison by forfeiting your shares and testifying against Victoria. The company will need a new CEO." He nodded wearily. "Marcus and Andrew are going to prison. Victoria will follow. It's over." "No," I said quietly. "It's just beginning." I handed him a folder, my plans for restructuring Sullivan Enterprises, clean energy investments, technological innovation, legitimate charitable work. Everything the company could have been without Victoria's corruption. "You're taking over," he said. It wasn't a question. "I own controlling interest now. The board votes tomorrow, but it's a formality. The real question is, will you help me?" He looked surprised. "You want my help? After everything?" "Not as CEO, not even as an executive, but as my father." I met his eyes. "If you're ready to be that again." For the first time in 20 years, I saw tears in his eyes. "I don't deserve a second chance." "No," I agreed, "but I deserve a father. And this company deserves a chance to be something better than what Victoria made it." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. Victoria, facing overwhelming evidence, accepted a plea deal, 20 years in federal prison. Marcus and Andrew got lighter sentences in exchange for their cooperation, but they would still spend years behind bars. The board voted unanimously to accept my leadership, especially after I presented evidence that Sentinel Securities' profits could help offset the losses from the foundation's collapse. My father, true to his word, took a humble role as an advisor. Each morning, he would arrive early to help me review contracts and strategic plans. Each evening, we would have dinner together, just the two of us, rebuilding 2 decades of lost time. 1 month after taking control, I stood in the mansion's foyer, watching a different kind of photo shoot. This one was for Forbes magazine, a cover story about the transformation of Sullivan Enterprises. Ms. Sullivan, The photographer called. "Would you like your father in this shot?" I looked at the man who had once chosen wealth and power over his own daughter. He stood uncertainly to the side, just as I had done so many times before. "Yes," I said, "I would." As we posed together, I caught our reflection in the window. Behind us, the security camera watched silently, no longer a tool for exposing crimes, but a reminder of how I had turned my exile into strength. The perfect family was gone. In its place was something real, imperfect, complicated, but honest. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from James Carter. "Victoria's appeals were denied. It's really over." I smiled, looking at my father as he proudly straightened his tie for the photo. "No," I whispered, "it's just beginning." Because sometimes the person they try to erase becomes the person who writes the ending. And in this ending, the forgotten daughter didn't just survive, she triumphed. The security cameras had seen everything, but more importantly, they had shown me who I really was. Not a victim, not an outcast, but a woman strong enough to turn 20 years of exclusion into an empire of her own. And this time, I wasn't just in the family photo. I was the one taking it.